Hey night owls, drift seekers, and cozy blanket historians, before you lean back, dim the screen, and let the white noise fan set the mood, do me one tiny favor. Tap that like button the same way a medieval barber surgeon tapped a vein, swift, decisive, and a little bit curious about what happens next. And while you're at it, slide down to the comments and tell me where you're tuning in from and whether you'd have survived a single hour in 14th century Europe. I comb through every message while sipping something suspiciously herbal, so drop your thoughts, your theories, or your favorite Plague-era emoji down there. Ready? Good, because tonight we're marching straight into a nightmare that somehow became a fashion statement, the infamous beaked plague mask, and the nose-curling reality of what it actually smelled like inside.
Picture it. You're in a narrow cobblestone alley that echoes with soft moans and the rattle of iron church bells droning a funeral cadence. Linen shrouds flap from windows like surrender flags, and a sour wind carries the odor of wood smoke, damp straw, and mortality. But you're supposedly protected. You draw the leather straps tight, thread them through the brass buckle behind your head, and feel the stiff beak settle over your face. Instantly, the world shrinks into darkness, broken only by two murky glass circles. Your breath muffles against the inner cloth, your pulse loud in your ears, and then, oh heavens, then the scent hits you. Not the sweet alpine breeze physicians promised, but a chaotic carnival of smells. Crushed roses turning brown, clove oil, rancid fat, vinegar-soaked sponges, and a damp mustiness like you just buried your head in a spice cabinet that caught fire in a fish market. Because the truth is, inside a 17th century plague mask, pleasant aromas died faster than most patients. To understand why, slip with me back to 1348, long before the bird beak became a meme. Europe was reeling from the Black Death, a bacteria-powered juggernaut that killed tens of millions and made medieval folk question every rule of the cosmos. Nobody knew about Yersinia pestis quietly hitchhiking on fleas, so doctors reached for the only theory that made sense to them: miasma. Bad air, invisible poisonous vapor that floated out of marshes or rose from corrupted corpses. If foul smells could kill, then fragrant ones, so the thinking went, could shield. Fast forward 2 centuries, Italian plague doctor Charles Delorme claims he's invented the ultimate hazmat suit. A waxed canvas overcoat, leather gloves, boots, a wide-brimmed hat to announce your profession from 50 paces, and the piece de resistance, a mask with a 6-inch curved beak stuffed to the brim with aromatics. He suggests dried roses, mint, camphor, cloves, cinnamon, juniper, and myrrh. Sounds lovely in theory, but here's the catch. Most of those ingredients were expensive imports that only state-paid physicians or opportunistic quacks could afford. Town councils paid by the body, not by the bouquet, and their budgets were, let's call them, aspirational. So the official recipe quickly devolved into whatever the apothecary had left in the bottom of the barrel. Wilted lavender mixed with moldy breadcrumbs, powdered frankincense adulterated with chalk, tack on a half ladle of vinegar and a dollop of pig grease to keep the herbs from blowing away, and what do you get? A steamy petri dish only inches from your nostrils. While you're breathing that in, remember the mask itself smelled alive. Most were boiled leather or stiff linen soaked in melted beeswax. Leather curing in the Middle Ages often used urine or alum. Both fragrances lingered no matter how much rosewater you splashed on top. Beeswax sounds pleasant until it's reheated by body temperature.
Then it releases a sweet sour tang that mingles with everything else, like a medieval smoothie from olfactory hell. And we haven't even addressed breath. Step into our second-person time machine again. It's July, Rome, 1656. You've spent 8 hours pacing plague wards stuffed with the sound of rasping lungs. Food is scarce, but you wolfed down onion porridge for breakfast. Now the sun's high, you're sweating under layers of waxed cotton, and every exhale blooms with onion fumes. They bounce off the beak's wooden interior, swirl around the camphor lumps, pick up a note of fermented rose petals, and bounce right back at you. Congratulations, you've invented the world's first self-administered tear gas. But wait, there's more. The mask's lenses? Cheap glass, often reused from broken reliquaries or salvaged from ship lanterns. They fog within 2 minutes, trapping moisture. That moisture trickles down the beak's interior grooves, where, mixed with vinegar, it breeds black mold. You start coughing into the mask. Cough droplets join the mold fiesta. The herbs turn into damp sludge. You're basically waterboarding yourself with aromatherapy gone rancid. And still, the city magistrate expects you to examine 3 more streets of patients before sundown. Now let's zoom out and talk science of smell, medieval edition. Physicians believed your nose had an internal furnace called the collidum innatum, the inborn heat, that cooked inhaled vapors and sent their properties into your bloodstream. Good smells fortified the heart. Bad smells drove in poison. So if a plague doctor fainted from his own mask, colleagues concluded the mixture was too cool, not spicy enough. Solution? Add hotter ingredients. Chili like grains of paradise. Resinous ossifioita, nicknamed devil's dung for reasons you can imagine. Or pulverized garlic soaked in turpentine. More stink, more protection, supposedly. Meanwhile, modern pathologists would later find fleas could scuttle right under the beak and onto the face, making the whole olfactory torture chamber medically useless. Let's walk through an autopsy of ingredients. Roses, symbol of Mary, staple of monastic gardens, lovely until they rot. In a humid beak, they decompose faster than lettuce in a carriage ride. Smell goes from floral to funeral. Cloves and cinnamon, imported from the Indian Ocean. Strong antiseptics, yes, but ground versions were often bulked out with sawdust. When sawdust turns damp, it releases a wet wood odor like soggy violin cases. Camphor, distilled from Asian laurel trees. Sharp, eye-watering, used to chase moths. Too much can cause dizziness and nausea. Side effects plague doctors politely described as holy swooning. Vinegar sponge. Doctors shoved one right at the beak's tip, believing acidic fumes repelled disease. After a week, it mellowed into eau de salad left in the sun. Animal fat binder. Goose grease kept powders from blowing away. Problem? Goose grease turns putrid by day 3 unless it's salted. Salt in your nostrils burns like Judgment Day. So yes, inside that bird mask, you're choking on a chemistry experiment gone medieval. Let's leave the nostril nightmare for a second to explore why appearance mattered so much. The beak was theatrical, an intimidation prop. When you trudged down the street, kids hid, adults crossed themselves, and doors slammed shut. That fear created distance, and distance, ironically, offered real protection. Not from bacteria, which nobody understood, but from angry families desperate for a cure. If patients believed you were half priest, half vulture, they might hand over coins and back away rather than grab your sleeves and beg. But intimidation has a price. Picture returning home at dusk to a lonely rented room. You unstrap the mask, place it on the table, and the smell finally escapes into open air. The landlady wrinkles her nose. The candle sputters as if protesting. Leather, mold, vinegar, sweat, and cheap perfume swirl out like a ghost you can't exorcise. It soaks into your mattress, your cloak, even your hair. When you dream that night, you smell it in your sleep. A phantom beak hovering over you. Let's answer a question the textbooks skip. Did plague doctors ever clean these masks? The short answer, rarely and badly. Water was believed to spread infection unless mixed with wine or spirits. Soap existed, but was pricey. Most physicians wiped the beak with a rag dipped in stronger vinegar, then set it near the hearth. Heat softened the wax lining, releasing even more odor. Some sprinkled gunpowder inside and lit it, thinking smoke purified. Talk about waking up to roasted cloves and scorched pig grease seasoning your breakfast. By now, you're probably wondering, did anybody refuse to wear the mask? Actually, yes. Many university-trained doctors skipped it entirely, claiming scholarly immunity through astrology or humoral balancing. Ironically, they sometimes fared better, simply because they spent more time scribbling notes at a distance than jamming their faces into swarm zones. The mask wearers, meanwhile, kept inhaling a germ-laden sauna through nostrils rubbed raw.
Ready for a final sensory twist? Contemporary accounts mention the sound inside the mask. With ears partly covered by the brim and chin muffled in linen, every heartbeat, breath, and footstep echoes like you're inside a drum. Add the clink of a pewter pomander dangling from your belt, another odor gadget, and you've got a private percussion section underscoring each whiff.
You may be thinking, okay, but could anything smell worse? Ask the unlucky apprentice whose job was to restuff the beak every morning. He'd scoop out yesterday's soggy herb corpse, scrape mold with a dull spoon, then pound fresh ingredients in a mortar already permeated with layers of past concoctions. Imagine prepping pesto in a blender that's never been washed since 1620. Now exhale that into a leather funnel and strap it to your face. Voila!
Before we float off into uneasy dreams, let's zoom to the privacy of your own 21st century pillow. The next time you complain about a coworker microwaving fish in the break room, remember the plague doctor who carried a personal microwave of odor wherever he went. Remember the patients who smelled him coming before they saw him. And remember that anxiety, the unspoken dread that maybe, just maybe, the awful scent wasn't protecting you at all. Maybe it was the smell of death getting comfortable.
So, as the candle in our virtual ward gutters low and your eyelids sag or your gag reflex twitches, breathe easy. No beak, no vinegar sponge, no devil's dung tonight. Just the crisp smell of fresh sheets and the digital hush of modernity. If you're still awake, slide down and tell me in the comments what ingredient you'd have stuffed in the mask to survive the stench, or whether you'd have ditched the whole contraption and taken your chances with fate. And hey, if this little sensory journey made you grimace, grin, or glimpse history from a new angle, smash that subscribe button like you're hammering cloves for extra protection. It tells the algorithm overlords that sleepy, curious minds are still very much alive out there. The street outside your window is still, lanterns guttering in the damp fog, but we're not staying here. Slide back into your wax-lined coat, cinch the raven beak tighter, and follow me past the squeal of iron hinges into the plague ward's dim heart. First sensation, your shoulders sag under the robe's weight. A full-length oilcloth cape layered over a quilted gambeson that was repurposed from someone's half-rotted arming doublet. The cloth smells like tallow candles, river mud, and last week's rainfall trapped inside its seams. Every movement releases a tiny gasp of mildew from the folds, so before you even reach the next doorway, the beak's bouquet of cinnamon, clove, vinegar now mingles with the earthy reek of wet barn straw. Welcome to Sensory Overload Medieval Edition. Your free hand fumbles for the long pointer cane, a polished hazel rod given not for dignity but distance. Its tip is stained dark where you poked a bubo earlier and forgot to wipe. It's impossible to tell whether that smear is dried blood, pus, or just grime from the floor rushes. Either way, you'll use the cane again in 2 minutes to lift a patient's blanket without bending close, so whatever clings there becomes tomorrow's problem. Ahead, a cluster of low cots, each body swaddled in grayed linen, breathes in ragged chorus. Almost musical if you ignore the sour odor of half-digested gruel splattered in the straw. You raise the cane like a tragic baton and gesture to a nervous apprentice with ink-blackened fingernails to come forward. He steps, trips, and a small copper astrolabe clinks against his belt. Astrology is your second line of defense. If the stars decree infection, you can always blame Mars ascending rather than your treatment failing. Lift the cane. Point. The apprentice unfurls the chart. Candles flicker across zodiac beasts, and you mutter, "Third house afflicted, best bleed him." That's where the leech box enters our story. Picture a wooden tinder safe the size of 2 fists, drilled with air holes and sloshing faintly. Inside, 20 swollen leeches writhe in cold well water, each scented vaguely of pond scum and iron. When you crack the lid, a damp wind of algae escapes. Even through the beak, you taste swamp. In the distance, church bells toll vespers. Leeches don't care about canonical hours, only heat. So you coax one onto the patient's mottled wrist, watching its jaw latch like a tiny grappling hook. There's an audible pop when the skin breaks, and thick blood wells, dark as plum syrup. The apprentice looks woozy. You're used to it. Except this time, you smell something new. The faint copper sweetness of fresh blood meeting clove fumes. In the cramped beak tunnel, metallic tang marries spice until your tongue feels furry, as though you've licked a rusty cinnamon spoon.
Step back, wave the cane like a conductor closing a symphony. Now comes Theriac, a miracle paste you purchased from a Venetian trader claiming it once cured Emperor Nero's barber. Theriac is the medieval smoothie of 60+ ingredients. Opium, viper flesh, saffron, myrrh, all ground with honey into a tar so dark it swallows lamplight. Unscrew its pewter lid and the smell punches you. Anise, rotten fig, camphor, and the sweet stench of snakeskins fermented under Mediterranean sun. Scoop a grayish dollop with a horn spatula, smear it on a linen compress, and bind it to the patient's chest while murmuring a Latin prayer you barely believe. In your nose, opium warmth drifts beneath vinegar high notes. You'd think the fumes might dull fear. Instead, they stir a feather-edged dizziness. You realize you haven't eaten today, only chewed fennel seeds to mask your breath, and the mask's cramped air tastes of licorice laced with body panic. Between patients, you steal into a side passage lit by a single rushlight. Time to consult your portable urine wheel. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. A circular chart painted in cheerful reds and yellows, keyed to 24 shades of bodily fluid. Pull a corked glass vial from your satchel. The liquid within is cloudy like weak ale. Pop the cork. Inside the mask, the scent of ammonia and sausage grease blasts you so hard your eyes water behind the glue-smeared lenses. The wheel says that Hugh predicts excess choler, imminent mortality. You jot a note with your crow feather quill, ironic given your own bird visage, the ink barrel poking your cheek through the linen mouthcloth. The quill sheds dander. You sneeze, bad idea in a sealed beak. The sneeze rebounds, fogging lenses anew, and for a heartbeat you glimpse only milky circles, while ammonia still pricks your sinuses. You'd kill for fresh air, but you tie the straps tighter instead, fearing a stray miasma tendril. Let's detour to the ward's back alcove where your apothecary chest waits, a miniature alchemist's lab in oak. Flip the latch. Inside, pewter files clink like a choir. You reach for spirit of hartshorn, distilled from deer antlers. Unstopper it, waft gently, except there's no gentle through a beak. You inhale and immediately regret life choices. Smell of burnt hair and caustic lye floods the chamber. The idea is to revive fainting patients, but right now the only one swooning is you. Sweat beads on your forehead. It drips down your temples, meets the leather rim, and soaks the linen pad stitched there. Give it an hour, and that pad will smell like goat cheese left on a battlement. You dab your brow with a sleeve already stiff with wax and spattered with someone's bile. Hygiene is theoretical. Still with me? Good, because shift change won't come for 3 more hours, and the night will only grow thicker. You shuffle to yet another bed where a girl clutches a woodcut of St. Rosalia. The woodcut's ink smells of lampblack and cheap resin. She begs for mercy in half-finished sentences. You whisper the same rote comfort, but what you really focus on is the tangle of lavender stems in the beak. They're wilting fast, releasing an herbal death rattle. You mentally note, tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow, you'll swap them for pennyroyal or sage. Anything but more lavender, which now evokes nothing except tragedy. A sudden clang in the courtyard, the corpse cart arriving. The driver calls up in dialect, wants certification each body is plague positive so he can claim a bonus. You trudge outside. Night air is crisp, tinged with chimney soot, but the beak filters every sensation through its stale perfume, so even fresh air tastes second-hand. You sign quick scratch initials with charcoal on a vellum scrap. Hand it over, and the driver tips a hat, sprinkling lice onto his shoulders. You notice because 2 land on your sleeve and start hunting seams. Inside the mask, you grimace. Outside, no one sees. Back indoors, you decide to fumigate the ward, another grand medical ritual. A charcoal brazier sits ready. You dump aromatic pellets of juniper tar and benzoin onto coals. Sweet smoke billows. Patients cough, but you nod sagely. The smoke, you insist, is medicinal. Truthfully, it's one more odor layered onto the beak's fragrance lasagna. Benzoin burns like vanilla dipped in plastic. Juniper smells of pine cemetery wreaths.
Combine with human sweat, rat droppings, and chamber pot splashes, and you've brewed an olfactory sermon on despair. Still, you pace the aisles, swinging a tiny brass censer like a priest of questionable hope, the chain clinking in rhythm with your cane taps. Each swing pushes fresh smoke into the nostril vents. The inside of the mask grows warm and syrupy, and your next breath feels thick enough to chew. Let's eavesdrop on the medieval mind again. You genuinely believe the beak and perfumes lessen your risk. Statistically, you might even die at lower rates because your grotesque gear scares people into standing a few paces back. Social distancing by terror. But numbers are fickle. Plenty of plague doctors still perish within weeks. Many leave wills stuffed under their mattress before dawning day one. Pause a moment. Listen. The ward quiets. Some patients finally sleep, aided by Theriac's opiate hush. A lullaby of groans softens to sighs. You stand there, a specter in midnight oilcloth, and allow yourself to notice hunger gnawing at you. From a pouch, you pull a heel of rye bread smeared with aged cheese. You lift the beak a bare inch, breaking protocol, and shovel a bite. Instantly, the combined bouquet of cheese, mold, vinegar, and smoke detonates full force inside the bird tunnel. You gag, then swallow, then vow not to eat again until after sunrise. But dawn is distant. Before first light, you'll dose 13 more victims, sign 6 death certificates, and rewrite 2 astrological charts because Venus slipped below the horizon, obviously altering prognoses. Each task etches new scents into the beak's wooden grain. So tomorrow, even with fresh herbs, yesterday's memories will still exhale at you, stubborn as ghosts. The oil lamps burn low. Beeswax curls inward, releasing that sweet sour whisper that started our journey. Your shoes stick slightly where someone's blood congealed on the rushes. The cane feels heavier, the lenses cloudier, your thoughts slower, thick as tar. Finally, the town bell tolls one stroke, midnight. Another physician appears in the doorway, silhouette crowned by a brimmed hat. Relief. You pass the cane like a knight surrendering a sword and shuffle toward the exit. Outside, you risk unlatching the mask fully, tasting real night for the first time in hours. Air rushes in, cold, damp, gloriously empty of cloves. You feel faint joy until you notice the beak hanging from its strap by your side still stinks like a spice shop set on fire in a tannery. It will follow you to your rented room, seep into the straw mattress, and greet you at dawn. So now, my modern friend reclining safely behind a glowing screen, exhale. Let those imagined stenches dissipate while your room fills with ordinary midnight hush, the hum of the fridge, maybe the distant hiss of traffic. But keep the lesson tucked behind your easier breathing. History is scented, and sometimes surviving meant trading one nightmare smell for another. The cockerel hasn't crowed yet, but the slate-colored sky is beginning to leak a dull pewter glow over the rooftops. You've slept maybe 40 minutes, if letting your eyelids stick together while sitting upright counts as sleep. Your rented attic room still reeks of last night's adventures, leather, vinegar, tallow, and the sour ghost of camphor that crept out of the beak the moment you set it on the stool. With stiff fingers, you pry apart the shutters. A low mist pools in the alley, muffling the clatter of the corpse cart already making its pre-dawn rounds. Somewhere below, wheels crunch over gravel, and someone mutters a prayer that sounds more like an apology. You swallow the metallic taste of nerves and splash your face from a wooden bowl. The water is cold enough to bite. It smells faintly of iron, drawn from a city cistern where rusted chains rattle day and night. You let the chill chase away sleep's cobwebs, then turn to the cramped table where your protective gear lies in a defeated heap. Wax-soaked coat glazed stiff as pastry icing, gloves curled like dead spiders, and, of course, the beak. Even motionless, it dominates the room, a morbid centerpiece. You catch yourself staring into its eye lenses, two circles of cracked glass that glint back dull candlelight, like the sockets of a saint's skull displayed on feast day.
Morning routine, if that phrase can apply to plague practice, begins with the notebook. You open to a fresh folio, sharpen the goose quill with a clasp knife, and jot the night's toll. 6 deaths certified, 1 miraculous remission, likely temporary, 3 patients bled and leached, 2 refused contact, 1 fled into the alley before you arrived. Margins fill with quick astrological doodles. Mars still malignant in Scorpio, Venus slipping towards the horizon. These scribbles matter less to physical cures than to municipal accountants. The city pays a physician by the task, and without written tally, there is no coin.
Coins, yes. You untie a leather purse and pour 8 silver groschen onto the tabletop. They clink like tiny tombstones. Half will go to your apprentice's wages. The rest disappear into rent, food, lamp oil, and the bottomless pit of apothecary costs. Rose oil doubled in price last week after rumors that Constantinople had fallen to new Oriental vapors. You chuckle bitterly. Supply chains never sleep, even when half the world does.
Breakfast is a gamble. Stale rye heel topped with dried apple slice and sprinkled fennel seeds to hide the smell of, well, everything. You chew without tasting, conscious that each bite will ferment inside the mask later. Then you reach for a small pewter phial of aqua vitae, raw brandy from a clandestine still in the banker's basement. 1 swig, just enough to numb the gums and coat the throat with liquid fire. The burn wrestles with lingering vinegar fumes, but at least you feel alive.
Time to suit up. First, the quilted gambeson, its armpits crusted with last week's salt. Next, the oilcloth overcoat. As you shrug it on, stiff creases scrape the side of your neck, and the faint aroma of rancid linseed rises. Gloves, thin kid leather today, slide onto your hands. Each finger feels like slipping into a wet eel sleeve. You tie a linen kerchief over your hair, then sit facing the beak. It stares back, judgmental. You open a new sachet of herbs, lavender, sage, and pennyroyal, bought off a peddler whose cart also sold rat poison and stolen candlesticks. The bundle already smells tired, but it's better than nothing. You thrust it deep into the beak's cavity, packing it around yesterday's half-dried gunk. The leather straps creak as you settle the mask on your face. Instant claustrophobia. The first breath tastes of old smoke and musty flora. You exhale, lenses fog, then clear. Showtime.
Down the narrow stairs, boots thumping. The landlady peeks from behind a curtain, holding a sprig of rosemary under her nose. She's convinced it wards off contagion, or you. You tip your hat brim, she retreats like a mouse. Outside, the air is crisp, but the mask insists on translating it into its own dialect of funk. You fall in behind the corpse cart headed toward the plague pit outside the north gate. Today's task: certify burials and supervise the lime burners. The cart driver, Olaf, thin, pocked cheeks, beard stiff with frost, acknowledges you with a flick of his cap. "Bad load, Doc," he says, voice hoarse. "4 whole families this time. They say the youngest was still breathing when I came." He spits, more from habit than revulsion. The spit lands, steams, evaporates. You nod, though he can't see your expression. The cart jolts, chains rattling, and a blanket slides, revealing bare feet staining the wood dark. You raise your cane, prod the blanket back into place, distance maintained by ritual poke. Even that tiny gesture wafts up another burst of smell. Decomposed almonds, turned milk, something sulphurous. It squeaks up the beak's tunnel and nests behind your eyes. You pinch your nostrils inside the mask, pointless but instinctive. Approaching the north gate, you spot women in gray hooded cloaks hurling fistfuls of juniper needles onto the cart's wake. They chant snatches of psalms, half prayer, half incantation. Every time your cane's ferrule hits cobble, you hear their refrain, "In pestilentia, Domine miserere." You wonder whether their ritual comforts them or simply marks time until their own cough begins. The plague pit is a scar on the landscape, a long trench dug by convict labor, its edges braced with rough timbers, bottom dusted in quicklime that glows pale under morning light. 2 lime burners wait with shovels. Their faces are swaddled in rags. Only bloodshot eyes show. They douse the pit floor with water from buckets, turning lime into caustic slurry that hisses and smokes. The smell, sharp as broken seashells and soapstone, cuts right through the beak bouquet. For a fleeting second, you feel almost refreshed, until the sting of caustic vapor skates down your throat. You cough, the sound echoing inside wood and leather like a drum. Certification begins. Kane taps each corpse. You shout notes to an assistant with a lead tablet. 1 male, about 30, buboes at groin and neck, late stage. Female, swollen tongue protruding. Each description floats into the morning air, carried by your muffled voice and punctuated by the scrape of shovels. The pit fills row by row. When the last body slides in, lime burners heave buckets of slurry, whitewash splashing over gray limbs. The smell becomes chalky, alkaline, stinging your sinuses, as if someone stuffed a piece of burnt bone up the mask. Task complete. Payment signed. Pit covered. Olaf wipes his brow, leaves to collect the next load. You squat near a charred oak stump, scratching new entries in the notebook. Your gloves squeak against the quill shaft, slick with condensation. A crow lands on the pit rim, eyes you, caws once, like laughter. Business never pauses. A runner arrives, a boy no older than 10, cheeks red, breath smoky in the cold. He hands you a sealed parchment from the city council. The wax bears an emblem of a sword through a dragon. You break it open. Summons to the bishop's palace. They want divine reassurance that burying outside consecrated ground is permissible. Politics draped as piety. You sigh. Inside, the breath ricochets back, fogging the lenses again. Off you march. The bishop's palace towers above the market square. Red and gold banners drape the facade, though their colors dim beneath soot.
Guards shift uneasily as you approach. The beak unsettles even hardened men. One guard gestures with his polearm for you to wait under a stone arch. You do, listening to pigeons rustle above. Their droppings freckle the paving. One splatters onto your shoulder. Birdlime on plague doctor. Layers of medieval symbolism no preacher could resist. You flick it away, the wax coat shedding it easily, then step inside when called.
Marble hall, incense haze, warm and sweet. For a moment you think, finally, a pleasant smell. But even frankincense must pass the beak's spice gauntlet. The result is a confusing perfume of church and charnel house. Bishop Adriano sits on a carved throne, robes white as bleached bone. He pinches a pomander ball to his nostrils. His eyes dart across your mask as though expecting the beak to snap. You kneel, awkward in stiff coat, and present the ledger. He skims, lips pursed. "We must ensure the soul's rest," he says. "Tell me, doctor, is lime an obstacle to resurrection?" You want to laugh. Small mercy, the beak hides your grimace. You answer in careful Latin. "Your grace, the Almighty requires no limb intact to raise the body. Lime only hastens the flesh to dust, as Scripture promises." He nods, relieved. He signs a purse of gold. You bow lower. Coins are coins, even if they smell faintly of fierce sweat from his glove. Outside again, noon bells toll. Sun climbs, warming wax coat. Essential oils inside the beak grow volatile, releasing an intensified wave of spice, vinegar, musk. You swear the mask is cooking you like a herb-crusted rump roast. You need a break. On a side street, you find a tavern shuttered to the public, but quietly serving officials. Passphrase muttered, you duck into the courtyard. They've set a table for masked professionals. A barber surgeon with crimson-stained apron. A notary whose quill still drips ink. A midwife holding sachets of sage. All wear smaller cloth masks, but yours outdoes them, the beak scything the air. They nod greetings, eyes weary. Lunch is boiled turnips, hard cheese, black bread. Steam from the turnips rises sweet and earthy. You contemplate removing the beak. Etiquette here allows it. You untie straps, lift the mask. It peels away with a suction smack. Fresh tavern air, yeasty, smoky, rushes over your face like baptism. The other diners avert their eyes from your sweat-streaked cheeks. You bite bread, sip watered wine. Every swallow feels like freedom until you glance at the mask on the bench. Herbs cling to its inner wall in furry clots. A droplet of condensed breath dangles, then falls to the floor. You realize if you don't scrape that crust away soon, it will live there forever, an archaeological layer of misery. Conversation drifts. Rumors of a healer across the river claiming to use magnet stones. Talk of a ship in port carrying saffron at triple price. Gossip that the prince's mistress has fled. You half listen, half daydream of a garden beyond city walls where nothing smells but pine and wet soil. Break over too quickly. Straps refastened, mask reclaimed. You promise yourself fresh herbs tonight. Back on the street, heat has turned midday air into a stew of horse manure, spilled ale, and human anxiety. Each aroma threads through beak vents, mixing with internal bouquet until you no longer identify individual notes, just one continuous chord of Plague City. A beggar kid tugs your sleeve begging coin. You tap him away with the cane's brass finial. Compassion feels thin as parchment.
Your final call today, the House of the Silk Weavers. Rich clients. They can afford real cinnamon and ginger fumigations. You climb an outside stair to a second-story hall. The Weaver Patriarch meets you at the threshold, face wrapped in silk scarf, eyes red-rimmed. 2 daughters lie fevered within. You perform the ritual. Pulse reading, urine inspection, consult of star chart showing ominous conjunction. You prescribe a poultice of rose honey and powdered pearl, astronomically costly but comforting in its extravagance. They pay in silver and worn gratitude.
Dusk falls. You trudge home. Body aches. When you finally shut your attic door, the mask comes off with a gasp. Rivulets of sweat run down your face, carving paths through grime. You light a tallow candle and, for the first time, gather courage to clean the beak properly. You scrape out the herb remains with a bone knife, wiping goo onto old rag. You rinse interior with watered wine, vinegar budget is gone, and watch dark streaks swirl. You hold the mask to the candle. Inside wood grain, tiny pores glisten, impregnated with days of stenches. You know they'll never completely leave. But as you set it by the window to dry, you notice something new. Faint scent of pennyroyal overrides the rest. Sharp, almost minty, promising tomorrow could smell marginally less horrific. You exhale shakily, stretch aching shoulders, and fold into straw mattress. The room is silent, except distant cartwheels, ever turning. Before sleep claims you, remember to whisper to the viewers through time and glass. Leave a comment, dear traveler. What smell from your own century would you pack into that dreadful beak to survive a day? Hit subscribe so tomorrow's story finds you, fresher herbs and all. And if you're ready to keep wandering this reeking labyrinth with me, just type continue and we'll walk deeper into apothecaries where scorpion oil simmers beside powdered mummy, into city councils bribed with musk-soaked bract, and into the half-lit kitchens where plague masks are stitched by candlelight. The moon has surrendered its thin silver coin to inky clouds when the knock rattles your attic door. 3 urgent taps, the secret rhythm that means, "Get up, doctor, the night is on fire again." You blink away the breadcrumb crumbs of sleep, swing your legs over the straw mattress, and immediately feel yesterday's waxed overcoat clinging to your calves like a cold, damp animal. No time to curse. You grope for the candle stub, spark flint to steel, and the wick flares just long enough to remind you how cramped this garret truly is. Pitched rafters sweating tar, beams scarred by generations of tallow smoke, and every surface littered with equipment you can't afford to break. A pewter syringe, glass urine flasks, an iron cautery brand that still smells faintly of roasted flesh. Outside the door stands Gita, your apprentice, eyes wide as saucers. She's bundled in a faded wool cloak several sizes too big, collar pulled high enough to double as mask. Her voice trembles. "Dockyard tenement, East Quay. 15 sick, 5 delirious. City Watch says the street reeks like boiled cats." She hands over a folded chit sealed with the harbor master's signet. Official summons. Hazard pay promised. You nod, though your stomach descends into a fathomless pit of dread. Harbors mean ships. Ships mean rats. Rats mean fleas. And fleas mean new plague blooms like mold after rain.
Still, duty and coin beckon. You reach for the beak, now draped on a peg like a silent sentry. Yesterday's cleaning helped. It exudes a mild ghost of pennyroyal rather than the full orchestra of rot. Tonight you add fresh-cut wormwood, peppercorns, slivers of lemon peel. Extravagant, yes, but the docks reek of tar and bilge. You'll need every aromatic ally. Sachet stuffed, lenses wiped with vinegar-soaked rag until they almost gleam, straps tightened. The world narrows into two cloudy circles framed by leather darkness. Downstairs, the landlady thrusts a clay mug of boiled ale spiked with nutmeg. "For courage," she mutters, averting her gaze. You tip it back. Sweet spice blurs the edges of your worries and coats the throat with warmth that will combat dockside chill. Gitta leads the way, lantern bobbing like a cautious firefly. The city sleeps with one eye open. Shutters are latched, but behind them you sense families whispering Latin prayers, counting pulses, listening for coughs that might turn fatal by dawn. The cobbles glisten from a midday shower. Reflections of lantern flames quiver in puddles, transforming the alley into a trembling corridor of light. Each step sends faint echoes off stone walls, a hollow percussion accompanied by the nasal rub of leather along your jaw. Somewhere a church bell tolls the midnight hour, each clang shimmering through the mist like ripples in a leaden pond. East Quay greets you with a bouquet only the bravest nostrils accept. Brine-soaked hemp, coal smoke, spilled whale oil, and, threaded through it all, the unmistakable ammoniac tang of human sickness. Tugboats groan at their moorings. Rigging creaks like restless bones. Ahead looms the tenement, 4 stories of weather-beaten timber perched above a tangle of nets and barrels. Candle stubs glow behind warped shutters. A low moan wafts from an open doorway, where a city guard waves you forward, scarf pulled high, glaive held loose, but ready as if germs could be skewered. Inside, claustrophobia surpasses anything your mask ever generated. The hallway ceiling is so low your beak nearly grazes blackened rafters. Families have dragged straw pallets into common areas, turning corridors into makeshift infirmaries. Lamp oil sputters, casting diseased skin in flickers of jaundiced light. Faces, gaunt, blotched, sweating, turn toward you with a mixture of hope and terror, as though death itself wears a restorative disguise. You draw a slow breath through herb-thick air and begin the grim inventory. Cane outstretched, you move from body to body. Buboes in groin, under arms, along necks. One sailor clutches a Bible, murmuring hymns between rattles. Another raves about a black dog with burning eyes stalking the docks. Fever dreams again, common when the brain stews in its own heat. You instruct Gita to record temperatures by touch. Her small, ungloved hand is quick and remarkably accurate. Each patient receives a mark in chalk, a cross for bleeding, a star for palliative opiate, a circle for immediate isolation.
Isolation, ha! The building is a tinder box of contagion. There's no spare room, just more bodies stacked like cordwood. You order windows unshuttered, though sea wind slices through carrying salt and invisible spores alike. Anything is better than the stagnant stew inside.
A matron named Ilsa collapses at your feet, apron already crusted with vomit. Her eyes roll white as she convulses.
You kneel, gloves slick, and wedge a wooden spatula between her teeth to save her tongue. A sailor helps hold her shoulders as you direct peppermint spirit vapor under her nose. She stabilizes, whimpering. You leave her with a linen soaked in brandy, cheaper than laudanum, but sometimes enough to quell the storm. Hours blur. You swab throats with vinegar, lance 2 buboes while lime water boils in a kettle to cauterize wounds, and supervise the removal of 3 corpses to the alley where watchdogs already circle. Throughout, the beak becomes a sauna. Sweat pools at your collar, trickles down spine, soaks underlinen until your entire torso feels pickled. Every exhale bounces back, hotter, wetter, more herbal. The mask isn't just protective, it's punitive, a penance paid in humid misery. Near dawn, you gather the tenants still conscious into the courtyard for final council. Lanterns line the perimeter, their meager flames wavering in chilled wind. Your voice, muffled but firm, lists instructions. Burn all bedding, scrub floors with lye, hang garlic braids, though you admit the real benefit is morale. Someone asks about miraculous relics. Another wonders if the new comet is to blame. You remind them comet tails carry no more disease than candle smoke. Fleas are the enemy. Catch the rat, spare a child, you say, quoting the city's clumsy health slogan. They nod, though fear still gnaws their faces. Payment arrives in a purse reeking of bilge. Harbormaster stands afar, pinching his own pomander. You count quick, then wave good might, promising to send ointments come daylight. Back through lamplit streets you trudge, Gita half asleep beside you. The beak magnifies each footstep into a hollow drum. By the time your attic ladder creaks beneath you, the horizon blushes pale lavender, heralding another relentless day. You collapse onto the chair, fingers fumbling at straps. The mask clunks onto the table, lenses fogged opaque. You peel off gloves, coat, doublet, each layer exuding a unique stench profile. Naked but for linen shirt, you lean over the basin, scrub hands raw with ash soap until skin stings. Water grays, swirls, empties. Gita brews chicory coffee. Bitter aroma overpowers mask odor for one blessed minute. Ledger time again. You write until cramped fingers revolt. Quill scratches. Harbor tenement, 22 examined, 3 dead, 4 critical, 15 unstable. Cause, likely Yersinia in ballast grain. Recommended, quarantine pier, fumigate holds with sulfur. You seal it for courier to the council, then collapse onto straw, too exhausted to remove boots. Sleep is a stitched patchwork of nightmares, a beak filled with scuttling rats, lime turning to snow, burying you alive, the bishop's pomander cracking open to reveal a beating heart. You wake at noon, drenched, the attic oven hot. Sighing, you drag yourself up and shuffle to the window. Outside, a market choir sings a hymn begging mercy. You think about mercy often. It rarely manifests except when someone finally stops breathing. Afternoon brings a new visitor, Master Albrecht, the guild perfumer, arriving with a wicker hamper. He bows, extends a sealed letter scented so heavily of civet you swear a wildcat just prowled in. The council wants you to test a scientifically formulated aromatic mixture designed by Albrecht. A potpourri of myrrh, cinnamon bark, crushed juniper berries, and, bizarrely, dried orange rinds imported from Spain. They plan to distribute sachets citywide. If the doctor endorses it, panic will ease, Albrecht whispers. Translation: your signature is worth more than the actual cure.
You agree to trial the blend, mostly because your current herb stock dwindles. In private, you unfasten the beak, scrape out exhausted wormwood, and stuff in the new concoction. The scent is heady, almost pleasant. Christmas in a charnel house. You tie straps, inhale. For the first time in weeks, the inside of the mask gives you a memory, not of plague pits, but of childhood winter nights beside spiced wine cauldrons. It's dangerously comforting. Comfort soon yields to skepticism. Pleasant aroma may soothe nerves, but will cinnamon dust clog airflow? You test breathing, short jog across the attic. Lungs protest but function. You'll wear it on rounds tonight. Evening settles. You draft Gita to boil instruments. She scrubs blades in vinegar, then plunges them into fire until they glow devil red. Sparks flit through the gloom like manic fireflies. The room smells of hot steel and sharp acid, another layer in the olfactory symphony that defines your life. Another summons arrives. This from the Grand Almoner, requesting presence at the soup kitchen. The destitute line up for onion broth. Many collapse right there. The almoner wants triage. You groan but strap up. New herbs, new hope. The soup kitchen is a converted granary. Ceilings high, air thick as stew. Steam mingles with coughs, forming clouds you swear you can see. You move through rows of pallets, cane tapping. New herb sachet holds strong, though cinnamon competes with onion fumes until your head spins spicy sweet. You catch yourself swaying and quickly pinch your nose recess, steadying breath. Gita slips sugar crystals under tongues of the fainting. You administer diluted poppy seed cordial to mute agony. When one skeletal child reaches to touch your beak, you let her. Small comfort costs nothing. Hours melt. Your back screams, calves cramp. Mask interior dampens until droplets cling to lashes. Finally, the almoner signals enough. Outside, rain begins, a steady hush that dampens city noises. You tilt your head back. Droplets bead on lenses, refracting torchlight into tiny halos. For an instant, you imagine the plague as a candle, its flame flickered dim. Then thunder cracks and reality surges back louder than ever. Home again in pre-dawn gloom. You hang the beak beside the window, watching rivulets of rain cleanse its leather shell. Cinnamon myrrh vapor still drifts out, mixing with petrichor, the smell of wet dust. You realize the beak is more than armor. It is a diary written in scent. Today's entry: cinnamon against salt air, juniper over onion broth, threaded with persistent undertone of death. Maybe one day scholars will identify eras by the notes lingering in surviving masks. This one, they'll say, belonged to a doctor who worked the docks, who faced salt wind and silent prayers. You pen final thoughts. Aromatics soothe but do not save. Yet hope is a medicine of its own. You sign, blow sand over fresh ink, close the book. The afternoon begins with a summons embossed in crimson wax, this time from the Guild of Scent Artisans themselves, an invitation that drips equal parts flattery and dread. Demonstration of advanced fumigatory science, 2 bells past noon, Old Rose Lane. Attendance mandatory for the city's licensed plague physicians. Mandatory is guild speak for show up or forfeit supply. You down what passes for breakfast, yesterday's rye heel soaked in cold chicory, then coax your stiff limbs into their layered armor.
linen undershirt, oilcloth doublet, the patched wool surcoat whose color no one can name, and finally the beaked mask that has already become as inseparable from your skull as a second jaw. Gitta fusses with the straps, ensuring the new cinnamon juniper sachet sits snug in the nasal cavity. You've taken to calling it midwinter, partly for its festive notes, partly because it reminds you that every frost kills fleas in droves. An environmental ally you desperately miss when spring winds blow disease back into the cracks of society. She hands you a leather satchel packed with account ledgers, spare lenses, sealing wax, and an array of miniature glass vials, empty, ready to be filled with whatever alchemy the perfumers display. Tools of the trade these days aren't scalpels alone. Scent is both science and salesmanship. The walk to Old Rose Lane meanders past shuttered boutiques where mannequins, cloaked in sheets to keep off soot, stand frozen like second-hand ghosts. A printmaker's window displays a woodcut of Saint Sebastian perforated by arrows, newly captioned, "Pray him pierce the plague." Someone has smeared the glass with lampblack in the shape of a mask's beak. Public commentary rendered in soot. You press on, cane ticking time against cobbles. Old Rose Lane ends in a cul-de-sac choked with carts stacked high with cedar shavings. Two journeymen shovel the fragrant wood into braziers that ring a modest stone hall. The air is heady already, cinnamon, cedar, a top note of clove. Inside, stained glass windows cast jewel-toned patches on rows of benches. At the front, Master Albrecht waits beside a contraption resembling a brass octopus. 8 curving pipes radiate from a central cauldron, each mouthpiece sprouting a swaddled cloth rose. A bellows sits underneath, ready to force scented vapor into the room. Physicians gather, 10 of you in total, masks nodding like birds around a seed pile. Some have beaks painted with enamel flowers, others are plain, scarred leather like your own. Albrecht clears his throat. "Gentlemen and esteemed lady," he adds, bowing toward you because your profession checks every box except predictability. "Behold the aromatizer. Fueled by my latest formula, it disperses antiviral vapor through any indoor space within minutes. Imagine no more miasmas festering in hostels, no more tavern stench thick as sin. Just breathe and be healed." He drops charred coals into the cauldron, sprinkles powder that flashes purple before settling into embers. Then he cranks the bellows. A hiss, a cough, and perfumed mist snakes through pipes, spurting from the cloth roses in gauzy plumes. The room fills with sweetness so intense your lenses fog. Behind the mask, you catch layered scents, frankincense, pine resin, perhaps a whisper of camphor. It's pleasant, dangerously pleasant. You remember that comfort breeds complacency and fidget with your cane. You remember that comfort breeds complacency and fidget with your cane. Beside you, Dr. Weller mutters, "If sweet air could stop contagion, dancers would be immune." His beak juts in skeptical profile. Another doctor, Hoffman, lifts a rose-covered pipe, inhales theatrically, and proclaims his lungs sanctified. You bite back a retort. Instead, you focus on the mechanics: steam, pressure, distribution speed. Useful? Possibly. But portable? Hardly. Most plague dens barely house a stove, let alone brass octopi. Albrecht unveils his second marvel, pocket pomanders, hollow walnut shells gilded in silver, filled with his signature blend, then sealed with beeswax to slow evaporation. Crack the shell under your nose, he demonstrates, twisting until a soft snap releases a puff of spice that even your mask vents cannot thwart. The crowd murmurs approval. You consider cost. Silver and spices imported from Levant will bankrupt dock workers before they scent a single breath, and disease always hunts the poor first.
Your turn to speak. The guild expects endorsement. You step forward, leather creaking. Master Albrecht, you begin, voice muffled but firm. May we test the vapor where it matters? In a ward thick with death, not a hall perfumed already by cedar braziers. A silence heavy as lead bars falls. Albrecht's smile droops around the edges. His showmanship meets your pragmatism. Yet he nods. A field trial agreed. That evening, a cart laden with the contraption rattles behind your party towards St. Matthias Infirmary, formerly a monastery refectory, now a hive of straw pallets and fever. The carriage horses shy at corpse wagons passing opposite. Stable hands whip reins, bells jangle, flies rise in clouds. Inside the hall, nuns in wax-coated aprons ladle broth, their starched wimples already wilted by humidity. You arrange the aromatizer at center, hoses draped between pallets like serpents over burrows. Patients blink through delirium, some shrieking at the sight of the brass monster. Albrecht tears open sachets, dumps powder, fans bellows. Sweet fog rolls. A woman rouses enough to smile, whispering, "Heaven smells like oranges." You grimace. Heaven rarely reeks of mortal commerce. 3 hours later, you conduct rounds with Gita, measuring pulse and respiration. Results? Mixed. Some cough fits ease. Vapors loosen phlegm? Maybe. But one boy succumbs regardless, pupils glazing amid clouds of frankincense. Air cannot replace blood. Still, perception counts. The nuns praise the angelic fragrance. Morale flickers brighter. You record data meticulously. Temperature drop negligible. Heart rates unchanged. Patient anxiety lowered. That last metric, though intangible, could tilt civic willpower toward survival. Outside, Albrecht awaits your verdict. Write your approval, he pleads, palms sweating cloves. You hesitate. Honesty versus need. His supplies could restock your herbs for weeks. You choose compromise. Your blend calms patients and staff. Use it as supplement, not shield. You write on parchment. He beams, brandishing the letter like a charter of knighthood. Back in the attic, night deepens. You scrape residue from mask interior, crystals of spice clinging like barnacles. They smell divine, but make breathing thick. You rinse with vinegar. Let the beak dry over a candle stub. The flame throwing grotesque shadows that flicker across rafters like silent pantomime. Ledger work again. You tally expenditures. 2 vials laudanum, half-roll lint bandage, quart vinegar. Income, harbor master's purse, guild gratuity, a single silver ring left by a grateful widow. Net gain narrow as always. You dip quill, note, comfort sells hope, hope slows despair, despair kills quicker than fever. Philosophical? Perhaps, but survival balances on psychology as much as physiology. Sleep drifts near, yet duty knocks anew, literal thumps on roof tiles. You climb out the dormer window onto slick shingles and find old Casper, the rat catcher, perched like gargoyle. He's clutching a burlap sack writhing with captured vermin. "Plague pits overflow," he rasps, eyes rimmed red. "Need permission to burn the latest haul." The city banned open fires after thatched roof district ignited last week, but buried rats resurrect fleas. You sign a scrap granting license to incinerate in the riverside kilns. Public health overrides regulations. He scuttles away, sack squirming. Dawn breaks pink, exposing soot on your hands from roof tiles. You wonder when you last touched clean linen. Perhaps never since donning this mask. 3 days pass in montage. Perfumed hall tests, back alley triage, bureaucrats demanding data, priests demanding prayers. The aromatizer tours hospitals like a minor saint, leaving trails of cinnamon and brass residue. Albrecht multiplies pomander production, apprentices soldering walnut shells as though forging coins. You worry about supply chains. Spices arrive by ship, ships bring rats. A circle as vicious as any bubonic lesion. On the 4th moonless night, trouble brews. A gang of dock workers, drunk on pay withheld due to quarantine, storm the perfumer's warehouse. They believe the guild profits off their families' deaths, selling hope at silver prices. Flames erupt, barrels of turpentine detonate, perfumed smoke billows over rooftops, roses and terror intermingled. Bells ring, guards rush. You and Gita arrive to treat burns. Skin blistered, lungs scorched by vapor and soot. Albrecht kneels weeping amid ashes of his fortune, clutching melted silver molds. You realize scent is volatile in every sense. Soothing when controlled, explosive when not. Economics of aroma crash just as bodies do. Later, council chambers echo with blame. Ordinances fly like arrows. Perfume deemed luxury, distribution suspended, despite your moderate endorsement. The city lurches back to vinegar and fear. In the aftermath, a courier delivers a bundle. Half-scorched walnut pomanders spared from the blaze. You crack one open. Interior blend now tinged with smoke. The fragrance that escapes is haunting. Orange, clove, and charred wood. The aroma of comfort intertwined with catastrophe. You slip it into the mask. Tonight, you decide, you'll wear memory itself. The next assignment waits. A noble estate just beyond city walls, where plague presence is still rumor, but panic already fact. Nobles believe money buys purity. You know money only buys thicker curtains behind which illness hides. Nevertheless, they pay triple. You mount a borrowed horse, beak bobbing like some medieval Tengu spirit, and trot through gates at dusk. The manor guards eye you as if death rides a dappled gelding. Inside, silk tapestries cover windows to block bad air. Ironically, they trap stale breaths. Servants line hallway, faces pale. The countess greets you, lace kerchief pressed to mouth. Her son, 12, feverish. You enter his chamber, fire roars, room stifling. You order windows thrown wide, embers doused. She balks, heat wards illness, she insists. You counter with science. Cool air slows bacterial bloom, fleas desert cold sheets. Begrudgingly, she consents. Examining the boy, you note no buboes yet. could be ordinary ague. You prescribe willow bark tea, cooling cloths, strict flea combing. The mask's walnut smoke fragrance drifts, oddly calming mother and child. They whisper that your presence smells like a holy vigil. A reputation forged in scent, strange currency indeed. You stay overnight in guest quarters lined with tapestries woven in crimson and gold. Luxurious, yet you sleep on floor lest lice lurk in feather mattress. Dawn finds boy's fever broken, relief palpable. The Countess presses a purse heavy with coin and a vial of attar of roses for your courage. You accept coin, the attar you keep for trade. It might soften next week's bribe. Returning cityward, you reflect how fragrance travels across class lines. Nobles hoard rose oil while dockfolk clutch garlic braids. Yet both believe aroma skews fate. Perhaps smell is the one democracy in plague. Every nose seeks reassurance. Back in the attic, you empty the beak, walnut smoke now acrid. Replace with fresh wormwood and a single drop of attar, a concession to luxury. The resulting bouquet is bittersweet, forest floor kissed by distant garden. You inhale and summon the viewers once more, candle illuminating mask like a lantern in fog. A damp wind hisses through the gap beneath the shutters, carrying with it the unmistakable tang of burnt feathers. You catch it even before Gita unlatches the garret door and blurts, "They're torching poultry down in Tanner's yard. Claim it purifies the quarter." Of course they are. After the aromatizer fiasco and the warehouse fire, the city has entered its next olfactory experiment. Smoke cleansing the streets with whatever stinks loudest. Chickens apparently have volunteered. You set aside the ledger, columns of dried ink arithmetic that still refuse to balance, and cinch the mask. Tonight's sachet is an improvised gamble. Time for sharpness, dried orange peel for morale, and a single desiccated marigold Gita swears repels sorrow. The beak smells like sun-drenched herb gardens strangled by autumn frost. Better than scorched feathers at any rate. Down on Tanner's yard, you find a half circle of townsfolk around a barrel fire. Someone has erected a makeshift shrine, a plucked rooster nailed to a post, wings spread as though mid-flight. Every crackle from the flames sends greasy smoke spiraling against shuttered facades. Two children wave hazel branches, wafting fumes toward doorsteps. An old tanner, his apron mottled with lime burns, barks, "Drive out the bad air, or we'll all choke on it." You've heard this sermon before, just never delivered by someone reeking of rawhide. You step into the glow, leather boots hissing on fallen tallow. Instinctively, the crowd parts. The mask does that, open seas faster than Moses. You raise your cane like a baton. "Enough," you say, voice muffled but still steel. Cooked feathers clog lungs worse than miasma. Pour water, cover embers with clay. Murmurs swirl. A woman presses a kerchief to her nose, eyes watery but defiant. The apothecary's broadside said bird smoke cures plague. You glance at the handbill fluttering on a post. Foul fume for foul air. An entrepreneurial apprentice must be funding his next ale. "Bird smoke cures nothing," you reply, "and dead hens attract rats. Bury them." The tanner scowls but nods at two lads who topple the barrel.
Sizzling fat spits across cobbles, steam rises, carrying away illusions of safety. You give them real guidance. Scrape lime into drains, hang sage bundles in thresholds, scrub door hinges with vinegar. Not miracle, but maintenance.
As the crowd disperses, a gaunt boy tugs your sleeve. "Doctor, Father says our attic stinks of dead angels." Poetic or delirious? You follow him 3 alleys north into a cramped weaver's loft. Inside, the odor hits like a gauntlet. Sweet rot mixed with something mineral, metallic. You lift lantern, joists drip with tarry residue. Then you see the source. 3 enormous chunks of raw galbanum resin hanging from rafters in gauze bags, exuding syrupy fumes.
The weaver emerges, coughing. "The friar sold it," he wheezes. "Said angel gum drives sickness out the roof. Instead, it traps every breath in sticky perfume. You order windows propped, resin tossed into ash bucket outside. Geeka rubs walls with diluted lye, while you coax the weaver onto the landing for fresher air. Within minutes, his coughing eases. Another victory for humble ventilation over high-priced hope."
Word travels fast. By dawn, your attic desk groans under parcels of dubious aromatics people beg you to vet. Charred hedgehog skins, dried leeches steeped in rosewater, a sachet labeled powder of 7 saints' toes. You incinerate half, archive the rest for study. Gita starts a ledger entitled Olfactory Superstitions, Quarter 3, her neat script chronicling each absurdity. Yet not every request is foolish. City Watch arrives midday with a sealed writ. Accompany them beyond the northern gate to inspect a peat bog field where shepherds report glow mold spreading after each night's mist. They fear it births contagion. You saddle the same patient gelding, pack vials, and slip a second mask into satchel in case Gitta must assist. The bog greets you with knee-deep sludge and an eerie bioluminescent shimmer, phosphorescent fungus thriving on dung heaps. Beautiful, yes. Deadly, no. Still, shepherds refuse to herd flocks past the lights, so plague may follow famine if wool trade collapses. You instruct watchmen to rake and burn the patches at dawn when spores are least airborne. Advise shepherds to relocate pens uphill. Practicalities again over panaceas. Exhaustion hunts you like a wolf. Returning cityside, you nearly topple from the saddle as vision swims between mask lenses. Gita catches your elbow, steers you home. She brews willow bark tea laced with a dash of brandy, your own secret insomnia cure. You surrender to sleep on the pallet, mask dangling from a peg, the herb-rose blend perfuming dreams. Dreams dissolve into nightmare. You stand in a cathedral gutted by fire. Incense furibles swinging from charred rafters, pouring cinnamon smoke onto a congregation of empty plague masks. Their beaks turn toward you in silent accusation. Fragrance without faces. You wake at twilight to frantic knocking. It's Albrecht, or what's left of him, beard singed, clothes smeared with soot, eyes wild. "The council blames me for the tanner's yard upheaval," he gasps. "They threaten fines I cannot pay." You pour him tea while he recounts hearings, confiscations, creditors. He's ruined. He begs for testimony that his aromatizer saved lives at St. Matthias. You could. Your notes show minor benefit. But lend him reputation, and you might share blame if riots ignite again. Ethical calculus razors thin. Finally, you promise a letter affirming limited efficacy under supervision. Not the absolution he craves, but a lifeline. He grasps your hands, grateful tears cutting tracks through soot. After he leaves, Gita muses, "Is hope a cure or a contagion?" You shrug. "Both, and we're pharmacists of it." She lights a single beeswax candle. Its pure scent reminds you not all odors deceive. The city herald bangs drums at dawn. New ordinance: all masks must include council-approved sachets distributed at churches. You and Gita queue at St. Agnes, where deacons hand out packets of lavender pine blend subsidized by taxes. You open one, weak, stale, but compliance beats fines. You'll augment with your own herbs discreetly. As you exit, a nun whispers that the orphanage across the river begs assistance. Children waste from hunger more than plague. You pack barley gruel, poppy seed drought for pain, and cross the bridge under banners proclaiming sweet air, strong faith. On the pier below, fishmongers burn old nets, adding briny smoke to the city's chaotic perfume. At the orphanage, the littlest ones clutch rag dolls stuffed with dried mint, cheap but comforting. You teach the elder girls to sew cloves into cloth sachets and hang them by beds. The activity distracts minds and masks dormitory odors. While Gita checks sores and fevers, you sit on the stone floor, children around you wide-eyed. They point at your beak and demand a story where smells save the hero. You improvise a tale of a brave shepherd who follows the scent of thyme to find medicinal springs that heal his village. They giggle each time you mimic sniffing. Leaving, one boy tugs your cloak, offers a single marigold, plucked from the tiny courtyard. You tuck it into your mask's ribbon, token of trust heavier than gold. That night, ledger again. You calculate, hope dispensed today, 3 barrels worth. Compensation, 2 copper pennies and a flower. Profit, intangible, yet heart steadier. You drift to the window. The city below exhales a collage of scents: lavender sachets, barrel fires, brewing wort, night-blooming stock from the convent garden. No single fragrance can dominate for long. And perhaps that is salvation. The plague cannot navigate chaos any better than the living can. The tavern shutters rattle long before dawn, but it's not the wind this time, it's the bells. High, insistent, metallic, they clang from every church belfry in the city like iron gulls shrieking at an invisible storm. You jolt upright on the pallet, pulse pounding. Gita's at the washstand, splashing her face with rainwater she must have fetched minutes ago. "They're calling an emergency convocation," she says, toweling off. "Council wants every licensed physician at the Guildhall by sunrise." You reach for the mask, fingers hesitating over the marigold still pinned to its ribbon. Faint petals, slightly crumpled after the night's tossing, but their scent, peppery hope, survived. You hook the straps around your head, seal the beak, and let thyme-orange air settle nerves. Boots, satchel, ledger, check. Gita slings her own lighter kit across her shoulder and bars the door behind you. Streets swarm with lantern light and rumors. Some swear a new pestilence ship docked after midnight, holds stuffed with rotting flax and fevered sailors. Others hiss about a cardinal's envoy collapsing on the cathedral steps, black blotches blooming through silk. You don't need confirmation. Panic provides all the evidence it craves. At the guild hall, torches spit shadows across carved saints who watch this earthly scramble with stony detachment. Inside, benches groan under a battalion of plague doctors, masks bobbing like seabirds. The Lord Provost, powdered wig askew, pounds a gavel. "Gentlemen and gentlewomen," he adds, glancing at Gitta, "the council, in its mercy, has secured a remedy of unprecedented promise." He gestures, and 2 guards roll in an oak cask bound with lead hoops. Stenciled on its side, Eris Sealens, Venice. A hush thicker than smoke. You've heard whispers. A silent air captured by alchemists in the lagoon. Odorless yet lethal, to disease allegedly. The provost continues. When this vapor is released, contagion cannot survive. No scent, no smoke, no stain, just purity. Tonight, districts most afflicted will be treated. Volunteer teams will deploy devices. Murmurs surge, half awe, half dread. A remedy that has no smell? After months of living nose first, the notion feels blasphemous. You stand. "My lord, has it been tested on the living?" The provost bristles. "Venetian physicians guarantee its efficacy." Guarantees travel faster than proof. Still, dissent draws side eyes. Council guards shift hands to sword hilts. You sit. Assignments are read. You and Gitta get the Weaver's Ward, narrow alleys, sagging tenements, the very heart of your nightly rounds. Fitting. The quartermaster issues each team a brass sphere the size of a melon, slotted with vents and fitted with a spring-wound timer. Set it, run. When the spring unwinds, it cracks a vial inside, releasing the invisible vapor. Outside, dawn sours the sky. You cradle the sphere like an uneasy egg while Gitta consults her watch. "Timer's 30 breaths," she says, "enough to find a corner and sprint." You pace to Tanner's yard, the site of last night's feather pyre, now littered with soggy ashes. Children poke at embers, disappointed the spectacle ended. You shoo them off, set the sphere beneath the overhang of a shuttered tannery. Wind the key until it clicks once, twice, thrice. Then you run, boots slapping stones, the marigold bouncing against the mask rim. From the mouth of an alley you watch. Nothing, no hiss, no plume, no scent. Only stillness. For a heartbeat, you think the device failed. Then a cat darts from the yard, back arched, hair standing. It bolts past you and vanishes. A goose tethered near the well honks, flaps once, then slumps. Your stomach chill. "No smell," Gitta whispers, "but something moved." Within minutes, the square looks blanched, as though color drained with the rising light. A washerwoman opens her door, sniffs, shrugs, starts lining damp linens, and collapses over the railing. You sprint, catch her before skull meets cobble. Pulse faint but present. You drag her into fresher air. She revives, eyes clouded. Inhaling marrow deep, you detect nothing. Even the tannery's usual reek gone. The sphere lies cracked, glass shards glinting. You and Gitta drag the unconscious goose, 2 dogs, 3 half-dazed townsfolk to the river breeze. Conclusions stack like coffins. Eris silence suffocates disease and anything with lungs. Invisible cure, indiscriminate killer. Council must know. But messenger boys race through streets already, ordering a second wave of deployments. How many spheres?
10? 50? Enough to scrub the city of life. You hurry back to Guildhall, mask beak tapping chest in rhythm with heartbeat. Inside, disarray, physicians arguing, guards barring doors, carpenters boarding windows so no contaminated air seeps in. The provost sweats behind piles of parchment writs. You slam the ledger, open to notes on Tanner's Yard casualties, onto his desk. Silent air is silent death, you say. Gita confirms with pulse counts, respiration rates. He waves a trembling hand. Side effects, temporary. Council invested dearly. We cannot appear fools. Political plague outranks biological. He orders you detained for inciting obstruction. 2 guards seize your arms. Gita ducks under their reach, snatches the ledger, darts through a side door. You twist, elbowing one jailer, sprint after her. The mask limits peripheral vision, but hides your panic. You and Gita zigzag through corridors into the library stacks. She thrusts the ledger into your satchel. Roof, she whispers. You climb a narrow stair, burst onto tiling slick with dew. Sunrise finally breaches clouds, painting rooftops golden, mockery amid impending asphyxia. Across the square, the cathedral tower looms. If you can ring its bells with a different message, call people outdoors, away from silent rooms, they might survive. You leap to an adjoining roof, shingles clattering. Guards shout below. Gita follows, nimble as a cat. 2 roofs later, you find a plank bridging to the cathedral annex. One at a time, wood bows ominously, but holds. Inside the belfry, ropes coil like sleeping serpents. You breathe time-orange courage, grip the largest rope, nod to Gita. Together you haul. Bronze tongues boom. Not the tidy peal of council decree, but frantic, irregular clangs. Morse code of desperation. City folk know codes. Even babies hush when bells speak. Between tolls, you shout through the mask. Leave your houses! Flee the silent air! Minutes feel like lifetimes. From the vent windows, you glimpse doors opening, confused heads poking out. Then, distant shouting as people notice limp pets, friends on thresholds. Chaos again, but this time fueled by motion, not stillness. Guards burst into the tower. You back toward a ladder, grab a smaller, sharper bell clapper as makeshift mace. But a familiar voice echoes. Albrecht, soot beard trimmed, eyes blazing. "Let them pass," he orders. Astonishingly, soldiers hesitate. His aromatizer profits perhaps purchased authority anew. He strides up. "Your warning reached me," he pants. "Council stockpiles in the arsenal by the river. They plan full release at Vespers." No time. You trade updates while descending spiraling stairs. Plan forms. Confiscate spheres. Prove lethality before public eye. But proof demands spectacle. Albrecht volunteers his aromatizer wagon, still intact, and a troop of printers already loyal to his pamphlets. "We stage a demonstration in Old Market," he says, "before council can censor." Afternoon. Heat shimmers. Market stalls abandoned days ago fill with restless citizens drawn by rumor. On a makeshift platform, Albrecht positions his brass aromatizer, now repurposed. Hoses connect to 2 containment jars. In one, you place a live rooster. In the other, a sphere of aracilans suspended in a net. You face the crowd, mask on, voice amplified through a leather cone. "Behold the cure they would pump into your homes," you announce. Albrecht twists a valve. The sphere tumbles into jar 2. Silent seconds. The rooster cocks its head, feathers ruffling. Then it slumps, eyes glazing. Jar 1, untouched, houses a second rooster, alive and flustered. The contrast needs no theology. Gasps ripple through market. Someone hurls the council broadsides into mud. Timing perfect. Council procession enters square, provost flanked by guards bearing crates. They freeze at tableau. Gitta steps forward, ledger held high. Signatures, testimonies, pulse counts, evidence. She slams book onto a cart. Murmur becomes roar. Guards glance at each other, loyal to pay or populace. They lower halberds. The provost's powdered wig droops in the heat. Sweat rivulets erase rouge. Uprising ends not with pitchforks, but with confiscation. Citizens chain crates shut, drag them to the river's edge, and, following your caution, sink them intact beneath currents to dilute vapor in rushing water far from intakes. A risky mercy, but better than streets steeped in silent poison. Sun dips. Evening air carries once familiar scents. Bakery rye, horse manure, chimney soot. Imperfections you now welcome like old friends. You, Gitta, and Albrecht sit on the pier, legs dangling. None speak for a while. Finally, Albrecht breaks silence. My inventions chased smells. Yours saved lives. You shake your head. We only reminded people to breathe outside. Gitta chuckles. The oldest remedy, fresh air, triumphs again. She flips open the ledger's last page, writes in neat hand. Cure, common wind. Side effects, clearer vision. Night settles, cooler, carrying river mist laced with damp stone scent. Lamps wink along quay like sleepy fireflies. The city is bruised, but breathing. You stand, turn to invisible audience beyond the mask, beyond time. And that, weary travelers, is how a cure with no smell nearly robbed a city of breath, and how a plague mask filled with time and one stubborn apprentice tipped the balance back. If this tale lets you inhale a little easier, tap the bell so you'll know when more quiet histories drift your way. Leave a comment of the strangest scent that ever comforted you, and share the story with anyone who needs a reminder that even in foulest air, ordinary lungs and ordinary courage can outlast the silence. Now loosen your own imaginary mask, let shoulders drop, and listen. That breeze rattling your window pane? It's just common wind, the simplest medicine of all. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift into sleep, where no bells toll and every marigold keeps watch. Good night.